Hello and welcome to a brand new video on my channel. Today, I'm excited to present to you part 6 of the story, Curse of Bloodlust, and I really hope you enjoy it. If you do, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and maybe even recommend my channel to someone who loves a good story. And with that, let's jump right into the next chapter. And so the day passed. Rune was surprised by how well she could understand her roommates and how genuinely interested they also were in magic and the supernatural. There was something beautiful, almost comforting, about having people around her with whom she could share her sense of wonder. But the biggest difference she noticed as the day unfolded wasn't just their personalities, it was their backgrounds. What stood out most to her was that the boy from the Godfield family, who should have known a lot about the magical world, coming as he did from one of the most powerful magician families on the planet, was surprisingly uninformed. He knew shockingly little about magic, despite being part of one of the strongest human magic lineages in existence. Of course, not the strongest, but certainly among them. And that meant something in a world like this. Before Rune could fully understand why that was, she opened up a little, sharing her frustration about her own family and describing a bit of what her childhood had been like. "You can't be serious. Sure, your family is magic-oriented, but there's no way they'd neglect an innocent kid like that the way you said. Did they really not feed you properly? Did you seriously have to clean the kitchen and work for your parents even though they were rich?" said the other boy, whose name Rune still couldn't remember, a bit too bluntly. This took Nathan Godfield so off guard that he instinctively stepped back, raising his hands to his mouth in shock. He hadn't expected anyone to be that direct, or to talk about someone else's trauma as if it were just a bad story. The way Argon carried himself seemed wildly exaggerated and full of arrogance. "I don't think you have the right to judge my past," Rune replied sharply. "And whether my past is true or false doesn't matter to you. I'm not sharing it to gain your sympathy or to be understood by you. I'm sharing it with the others because I find it amusing, and because they might understand me. If you want to keep living in your little bubble where the world is perfect and all noble houses are kind and friendly, be my guest. But the world isn't black and white, and sooner or later, you're going to learn that, either the easy way or the hard way. And judging by how ignorant and stupid you're acting, I'm guessing it'll be the hard way. And by the way, you're so arrogant I haven't even bothered to remember your name. What was it again? Something with an A. Ardo, Argon, Arlen. I don't know. Screw it, I'm not going to remember. People who act like jerks don't deserve to have their names remembered. So either be nicer or stop acting like an asshole. Maybe then I'll consider remembering your name. Jackass." Rune said all this in a mildly irritated tone, which stood out, especially since she usually seemed so emotionless. "Do you even know who I am? Do you know who you're messing with? My father will hear about this," Argon snapped, his fiery red hair and near black eyes, perhaps a deep midnight blue, flaring with anger. No idea who you are. But if you're stupid enough to want to pick a fight with me, we can settle this after school," Rune answered, a hint of bloodlust creeping into her voice. The murderous undertone didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the room. Rune suddenly seemed like a different person. Where moments before she had seemed a little empathetic, she now looked completely ready to tear Argon's head off. But before things could escalate any further, both Rune and Argon were stopped by the others in the room, who knew full well that a fight on the very first day of school would almost certainly lead to punishment, and would not bode well for their future living situation. Still, Rune wasn't one to back down or be talked down to. "I don't care who he is. If any of you, or anyone, threatens me, I'm not just going to sit there and take it," she said. When Rune asked Argon for his last name, hoping to find out more about his identity, he suddenly seemed shy and far less arrogant than before. He clearly didn't want to say it out loud. But then Mia revealed it for him. His last name was Lindenstein. Rune immediately pulled out her phone to do some digging, and as soon as Argon realized what she was doing, he tried to stop her. But she was undeterred. When Rune found the results in the paranormal mythological network, known as the Paranetwork, she couldn't help but laugh. Sure, his family was filthy rich, but wealth alone couldn't compare to real power or influence. After all, there were things money simply couldn't buy. Like talent. No amount of money could grant someone magic if they didn't already have it, nor could it help anyone master imprinted magic if they didn't have the potential. As everyone knew, all living beings were born with some form of innate magic, but mastering imprinted magic was either something you could do, or you simply couldn't. It was that straightforward. As Rune thought about this, she wondered how on earth she ended up grouped with such a loudmouth like Argon Lindenstein. Their names, Rune Blackstone and Argon Lindenstein, sounded oddly similar. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe they were distantly related. But at the end of the day, Rune didn't care enough to dive into any sort of ancestral research. Honestly, even if he was directly related to her and threatened her, she'd still punch him in the face just as hard. And thanks to the innate magic factors she had already copied by this point, Rune wasn't particularly worried about conventional weapons either. Even if he used his wealth to hire mercenaries armed with machine guns, she'd still survive, as long as she had enough blood. Killing her would be really hard under those conditions. Fact, the only realistic way to end her life with sufficient blood in the area would be a tactical bomb capable of leveling a large section of the city. And Rune was confident no mage family, no matter how powerful, could authorize a missile strike in the middle of a populated area. So, all things considered, everything Argon Lindenstein had thrown at her so far was just hot air. I honestly don't know what's wrong with you, Argon. You think your world is black and white, and you act like my past is something you get to make a speech about. The past is the past, and whether you choose to deny it or not, I don't care. But if we're talking power, my noble house has more than enough strength to crush yours. Sure, you're filthy rich, but not rich enough to start a war. So pull yourself together. The world is already falling apart. Sooner or later, you'll challenge someone you can't beat. Consider that a friendly warning, says Rune, as she realizes that an inflated ego might one day cost him his life. As he tries to say something or talk his way out of it, Rune's no longer listening. Her focus has already shifted to something more important. The first day at Intermagic's Academy is drawing to a close, and now it's time to organize her class schedule. To do that, Rune asks around to hear what others think about the available courses and what each of them teaches. She leaves her shared dorm room, or suite, depending on how one wants to call it, and talks to a few other students. After gathering some opinions, she decides to enroll in the following classes. Runescript, Arcane Forging, Elemental Channeling, Magibeast Studies, Arcane Phenomena, and Techno-Arcanics. I hope this works, she thinks as she finishes selecting her courses. I honestly have no idea how the magic of these books or papers works in this castle, so I guess I'm done now. Let's see what happens. If nothing happens, I'll just ask my roommates, except Argon. He's kind of weird. As she finalizes her schedule, the sheet folds itself into a small origami bird and begins to move, not truly alive but animated by magic. The tiny bird flaps its paper wings and flies out the open window, joining a flock of other paper birds. Rune has to admit, it's an incredibly cute way to deliver information. With every flap of their wings, the birds seem to shed letters, though she now knows that's just a magical side effect. They're not actually losing any information. Time passes. Rune spends the rest of the evening with her roommates before the final 2 days of the week. Thursday and Friday mark the official start of the school year. And they turn out to be quite interesting. When Rune steps into her classroom, a question crosses her mind. How is it even possible to teach magic to thousands of students when there's only a limited number of mages in the castle, and they obviously can't be in several places at once? But Rune soon realizes she was mistaken, because here, they actually can be. Holy shit. Why is the teacher I just saw walking down the hallway now inside this room? That elf shouldn't be both here and there at the same time. Is this some kind of innate ability? But even if it were an innate magic, she wouldn't be able to use it continuously. Her magic level wouldn't stay exactly the same. Because if it does, then this ability is broken as hell. Rune thinks, her mind racing as she tries to figure out how such a thing could be possible. But the more she ponders it, the more she starts to consider another possibility, that this might not be an innate ability at all, but rather a form of the castle's magic. Phenomenon magic. The kind of supernatural, inexplicable force that can achieve effects similar to innate magic. Hey, teacher, what's your name, and why are you in multiple places at once? Rune asks curiously. That's actually quite easy to explain. You see, student, I'm not the teacher you saw earlier. I am a construct of the castle. I'm here to teach you and to be a perfect copy of the original. Unfortunately, copies like me cannot leave the castle. The magic simply can't be maintained outside these walls, says the false teacher. When Rune asks what the being is that created or controls this false teacher, it smiles and answers that it didn't really have a name when it was born. Over the millennia, many names have been given to it. But you could think of me as something like an artificial intelligence, only much older. And instead of being artificial, I'm more of a false soul. A spiritual being born from a fusion of engraved magic and phenomenon magic. My existence is one of a kind and, with extremely high probability, impossible to replicate. So you might as well ignore that part. I came into existence through a whole chain of accidents, very, very long ago. Says the consciousness of the castle, which bears no name. Time passes, and as Rune reflects on what she's just learned, she realizes that it doesn't truly matter what this being is. To her, it feels like nothing more than an imitation of life. But this imitation is harder to define than a standard artificial intelligence. The comparison fits well, yet not completely. Rune concludes that whatever this magical artificial intelligence is, it cannot be the same as a technological one. But one thing is certain, the castle's walls are not infused with life force, they have no soul, and the castle itself possesses no innate magic. Which leads Rune to one undeniable conclusion: it was never born, and it never had a soul. You've probably already heard this a few times from other teachers or staff members, but just to be sure, I'll explain it all to you again, the false teacher began. At this school, your performance is what matters most. It's completely fine if you have conflicts, throw parties, or whatever else. However, attempted murder or property destruction will be punished. You can be expelled if the Department of Law and Order or the school board deems you a threat to other students. That said, you can also get into trouble for violating other rules, like bullying. If you engage in any form of bullying, racial, verbal, or otherwise, you might be expelled. The same goes for sexual harassment. Now, to be clear, we don't have a problem with two people liking each other and getting intimate. That's your business. The teachers and the school board won't interfere in your personal matters unless it results in a fight or a rule being broken. Everything else is entirely up to you. Whether you attend classes and get good grades or skip them and still get good grades, either way is fine. It's your choice how to use the money your parents invested in this school. Whether you waste it by ignoring your lessons or not, it's all on you. Oh, and after the weekend, I won't be guiding you through the hallways anymore. So learn the layout and floor plan of the castle. I'm only doing this at the beginning to help speed things up a bit. Right, with that out of the way, we can start the lesson. With a snap of his fingers, several books lifted off the teacher's desk and fluttered through the room like butterflies, distributing themselves onto various tables. For those who don't know how to use these books, just treat them like a kind of touchscreen. Rest will come naturally, he added. At that moment, Rune heard a faint echo behind her, the name of the teacher standing before them, even if she wasn't the real one. Maribel. A mage who looked strangely familiar to her. Then, as Rune thought about it, she remembered. Maribel was a well-known elemental mage with a flair for the dramatic. She'd nearly ended up in prison several times for breaching magical secrecy laws and for the chaos she caused with her explosions, ice barriers, and other spells. She enjoyed dueling and was, frankly, a difficult personality. If she didn't have mastery over most elemental magics, a rarity, no one would ever hire her. But the mere fact that she had learned multiple elements made her an extremely valuable teacher. She had been teaching this course for 40 years now, without ever being fired. Surprisingly, despite all her oddities and quirks, Maribel had remained a good teacher. The rest of the lesson passed with Rune listening to the others' questions about elemental magic and noticing how annoyed most students were that wands weren't allowed. Rune learned a lot, and she was surprised to find how many people had been relying on wands. They seemed to act as a focus, a tool that simplified the use of magic. In a real battle, if the wand breaks and the caster can't use magic without it, they're helpless. What surprised Rune most, however, was how popular spoken spells were. Everyone seemed to use them, even though, in theory, it didn't really matter from which part of the body the magic was released or how the spell was cast. But when Rune tried mimicking them and uttered a few spells herself, it all felt wrong. Maybe I should just try it mentally. Maybe that'll feel a little more natural, Rune thought, and then, in her mind, she cast Pataculus Infernia. With a slight smile on her lips, she watched as her magic followed her thoughts. A pattern formed, flowed into her hand, then streamed out through her palm. The energy gathered in the air before her hand, and a spark ignited. A second later, Rune clearly saw how the magic flowed and began to wonder if she could do the same thing without even thinking the spell, just by intending it. After a few moments of experimentation, Rune realized that, at least in theory, it was possible. If she simply held the thought, fireball, the magic would follow that intention on its own. She considered telling someone, but then looked around and noticed that the entire room had fallen silent. You all look like you've just seen a ghost. What's going on? Rune asked, glancing around at the others. Silent magic, how is that possible? She just started learning magic. And where's her wand? Didn't she begin with a wand? This can't be real, a voice from the class muttered. Rune hesitated, wondering how to respond. She realized it might have been a mistake not to bring a wand. Claiming she had never even held a wand before, and had just managed to cast silent magic, something clearly rare, would definitely not help her stay under the radar. And Rune was beginning to see that staying unnoticed might be harder than she thought. Well, that surprised me, she thought. I didn't expect it to be that easy, but the way people are staring at me, including my roommates, suggests I did something extraordinary. The only question now is, how far above the norm does my talent go? I need to be better prepared next time. I really should go to the library and read up on magical standards, spiritual creatures, and whether there's a ranking system for spirits, gods, demons, that sort of thing. As Rune notices how speechless everyone around her has become and how surprised they look, she realizes she needs to defuse the situation before she attracts even more attention. What a coincidence, I must be lucky, she says, trying to play it off as chance, though she knows that won't help much. As she sits there and time drags on, her classmates begin whispering among themselves, and she feels the weight of their stares. She wonders how to steer clear of further scrutiny, but the rest of the lesson flies by and she finally escapes the crowd and breathes freely. Man, that was nerve-wracking. I don't ever want that much attention again. This sucks. I have to figure out what's up with elemental magic and especially silent spellcasting. And that elemental manipulation book I just got isn't going to help, Rune thinks, watching the book flutter behind her. That looks weird. Everyone here has multiple books flying in perfect formation behind them. At least I don't have to carry the damn things, but it still looks bizarre, she continues, bemused. During the break, Rune makes her way to the library and asks the librarian how to find a book on silent magic or, rather, the topic of casting spells without words. The librarian arches an eyebrow and asks if that might be a bit advanced for her. I just want to understand the basics of silent spellcasting. I'm curious, and I don't expect to master it right away, but I'm interested. How do I find that? Rune replies. What happens next leaves Rune momentarily speechless. The librarian, about the height of a shorter human, turns to the shelves, adjusts her glasses, and as the sunlight streaming through the tall windows catches her golden eyes and red curls, she calls out, her voice echoing through the entire library, I have someone here looking for a book on silent spellcasting, come forward, please. A few seconds of silence follow as the last echo fades. Then something curious occurs, the hush is interrupted by a rustling like paper. The shelves tremble slightly, and countless almost inaudible whispers drift toward Rune's ears as a single book flutters down from the dense forest of shelves and lands open on the table. What the hell was that? Why does it sound like these shelves are a forest? Rune mutters to herself, puzzled. My child, it's simple, the librarian announces. This library is magical. You're a first year, right? That explains a lot. Don't worry, our students don't notice any of this. We have very effective methods for isolating noise. You can be as loud as you like here. Those who need silence to concentrate remain undisturbed. And besides, how else would I communicate with the books? They must know what I want. I noticed you don't recoil even though you can see my fangs. You know I'm a vampire. Others in the halls keep their distance or find it off-putting that I'm a vampire. Not enough to bully me, just a respectful distance. Why don't you mind? Rune asks, curious and surprised. That's easy, the librarian replies with a shrug. I've been through enough crap in my life that a vampire is the least of my fears. And you couldn't hurt anyone here and get away with it, even if you were a noble vampire. There's almost no way out of this place, so I'm not worried you'd do anything. Besides, most legends about vampires being weak are just that, legends. Where do you get that from? I get the impression that the vampire community hardly interacts with the rest of the magical world. So how do you know that most vampire weaknesses are just inventions? Rune asks. The librarian smiles and replies that she has countless books to keep her company, and that she's older than she looks. Pandora raises an eyebrow but shrugs, since looking human in this world of wonders doesn't necessarily mean you truly are one. Okay, then I won't pry into your past. Do you have books on these topics? Spiritual creatures, spirits, gods, demons. I mean the spiritual variants. I know there are demons that exist physically, but I want the spirit ones. Another topic I'm interested in is smithing, alchemy, and how to create magical artifacts. And I'd like something on phenomenon magic and how to use it. I don't mind if I don't understand the books right away. I'm just curious and want the information, Rune says. We do have those, the librarian replies, retrieving the requested volumes. The first book Rune picks up is titled The Secret World of Spirits, and when she opens it, she finds an exciting overview of every type of spirit, clearly summarized, with a disclaimer that it's only a rough survey, but exactly what she was looking for. The second book, on smithing and artifact creation, is equally intriguing, titled A Day in the Life of a Smith. Rune frowns and thinks the author must have a dreadful sense of naming. Rune can't complain, though, since her own naming instincts would be just as terrible. The next book appears to be by the same author, the handwriting style and the odd titles match. None of the books bear a signature or any clue to their origin. Rune frowns as she reads magical beasts and their properties. Processing enchanted materials. The fourth book is Runecraft and the Script of Magic, which surprises her. It's clearly more organized, printed rather than handwritten. Okay, these books are great and should do for now, but why are they so wildly different, and how are they so unlike normal books from the non-magical world? What do you mean by that, Run? Asks the librarian. Run pauses for a moment to think, then opens one of the books to a random page. She swipes her hand over it, hums thoughtfully, zooms in, and points at the paper. Why in the world does this behave like an ebook reader? Or like the ink is reacting to my gestures? And why are the books floating around me like little butterflies? How do they always know who they belong to or who they're supposed to follow? I find that very interesting, says Run. The librarian smiles. That's actually easy to explain. As you might have guessed, the books are enchanted. You're not very familiar with rune magic yet, but in this library, all the books are enchanted, and with runes, you can do just about anything you can imagine, if you have the right ones. What exactly qualifies a piece of writing as a rune is still a big mystery. For a very, very long time, old and long forgotten scripts gradually become runes. But for a rune to actually have an effect, it has to be infused with magic. You can't just write a rune and expect it to spit out a fireball. It's more like, you write your will into the rune form, follow a few additional rules, and at the same time, channel magical energy into it. And only if all these conditions are met, you end up with things like this. Books are enchanted scrolls that store spells. All of that is possible with runes. Think of it like a programming language, but far more versatile. It doesn't just affect books, it can influence the entire world around you. But runes also have a weakness. Once someone knows where the runes are, they can cross them out or destroy them, and that will cancel their effects. The librarian speaks in a relaxed and cheerful tone, as if genuinely happy to share this knowledge. After thanking the librarian and leaving the library, Rune notices students stepping away from her, and one looking nervous, as if afraid she might attack. She'd sensed something off when she first arrived at this school, but she didn't expect it to escalate so quickly. "Stay away from me, vampire," murmurs the nervous student, holding a silver cross toward her. Rune frowns and walks past him. When I think about it, there's no law in the vampire community forbidding us from revealing our existence to other magical creatures, including human mages. And anyway, it's only a matter of time before the truth about vampires comes out. Someone will try to stab a vampire with silver. But silver only affects vampires in powdered form if inhaled or introduced directly into the bloodstream. Otherwise, silver has no more effect on me than any other metal. So I can demonstrate how little silver actually affects me. Or crosses, Rune thinks, turning back to the visibly frightened boy. "I said, stay away from me, you vampire," he repeats, stepping back. Rune advances one step toward him. He retreats each time she steps closer. She takes the wooden cross from his hand and smiles gently. I'm sorry, but this has no effect on me. Crosses are just objects, and you don't need to fear me, unless you continue acting like a coward and a nuisance. I won't hurt you, I'm no more a monster than any other creature here. I truly don't understand why you're afraid of me when trolls, elves, and fae walk these halls. And you think I'm more brutal than that troll over there. We're all equally civilized. We may have different traditions, instincts, and emotions, but that doesn't make us any less intelligent. I'm not a ghoul. A ghoul has decaying flesh. Do I look decayed to you, you idiot? So pull yourself together. And if you give me grief again just because I'm a vampire, I'll smack you. It's that simple. Leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone, Rune says, handing the terrified boy back his ridiculous cross. She sees no reason to show respect to anyone not far more powerful than herself. As Rune heads to her next class, her thoughts drift back to her plans. I could slip Nathan Godfield some tasteless ingredients in his food to boost his blood production. There must be materials, mushrooms, enchanted plants, potion ingredients, that do that. With a little sedative at night, the plan's set. I just have to be sure to be silent so I don't wake anyone when I feed on him. And I'd need a minor healing spell to close the bite wound afterward. Yeah, that's all doable with money. I could easily buy or commission those spells, Rune thinks. Thank you so much for watching. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked part 6 of The Curse of Bloodlust, go ahead and click right here. You can now click on the playlist on the right side of your screen. There's a link right over here to take you straight there. On the left side, you'll see a link to the latest video I've uploaded, and at the top center, there's a link to my YouTube channel if you want to subscribe or check out more content. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you in the next part. Until then, take care and goodbye.